So we're a minute over, and I don't want to interrupt too much into our time, and so I'll go ahead and start with our housekeeping and our welcome for today. So again, welcome and thank you all for joining today's grant solicitation webinar, the fiscal year 2021 Multi-State Mentoring Programs Initiative Solicitation. My name is William Moore with OJJDP's Intacc. And before we get started, I do have a few announcements and reminders just to keep in mind for our audience. First, please note, for everyone who's attended or joining, this is a webinar that will discuss the fiscal year 2021 Multi-State Mentoring Programs and Solicitation. It is not a webinar focusing on multi-state mentoring programs. Instead, this will focus on specifically the fiscal year 2021 solicitation grant offered by OJJDP. Just want to make that clear for our audience who has joined today so that they're aware of the webinar for today. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded and will be published on OJJDP's multimedia page. On that multimedia page, you'll be able to view archived webinars. If you would like to get access to any of the supporting materials, you may do so by contacting OJJDP TTA at usdoj.gov to get access to any of those supporting materials related to those webinars on this website. For those who are having trouble downloading the event items that we've provided, please contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk at OJJDP TTA at usdoj.gov, and we can give you assistance with getting access to those materials. For the most optimal audio, we do recommend for you all to have the WebEx system dial out to a phone line. When you're connected, you'll see a phone icon that will appear next to your name there. Please note that all attendees who have joined have indeed joined on mute. So you are indeed on mute. No worries about you interrupting. We do have all attendees coming in on mute. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties during today's webinar, please send a private chat directly to me, the host, and I can help you troubleshoot any technical difficulties you may be experiencing. Throughout today's webinar, we will have you to submit your questions related to the solicitation via the chat box. What we're asking folks to do is to please go into the chat box, click in the chat window, type your question. Before you hit send, make sure that in the to selection, you select all panelists. So underneath the selection there where it says to, make sure that you've selected all panelists, and then you may submit your question, and you'll hit enter or you'll hit send before sending your new question. So please, again, make sure that you select all panelists before sending in your question for today's solicitation. All right. If you're viewing by yourself, there's no need to type anything at this time. However, if you're viewing in a group, meaning that you are viewing with multiple individuals, please help us count. Go to the chat window and send, again, to all panelists how many additional people are in the room with you today. So, for example, if it's yourself and say your program manager joining with you, you would put in +1. But if you're viewing by yourself, there's no need to type anything at this time. Okay. And let's see. Oh, let me go here. Make sure that, here we go. All right. Now, that being said, I would like to turn today's web event over to Rakia Franklin for our webinar. Rakia, take it away.
Thank you, Will. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rakia Franklin, and I am a program manager with OJJDP. Before we get started today, I wanted to give you some background information regarding the Office of Justice Programs. As you can see attached is the organizational chart. OJP is the federal government's leading source of funding and research to strengthen the justice system, support law enforcement, and enhance victim services. OJP consists of the following 6 program offices: BJA, Bureau of Justice Assistance; BJS, Bureau of Justice Statistics; NIJ, National Institute of Justice; OVC, Office for Victims of Crime; the SMART Office, Office of Sex Offender Sentencing, Monitoring, Apprehending, Registering, and Tracking; and finally, OJJDP. OJJDP envisions a nation where our children are free from crime and violence. If they come in contact with the justice system, the contact should be both just and beneficial to them. OJJDP provides national leadership, coordination, and resources to prevent and respond to juvenile delinquency and victimization. OJJDP supports the efforts of states, tribes, and communities to develop and implement effective and equitable juvenile justice systems that enhance public safety, ensure youth are held appropriately accountable to both crime victims and communities, and empower youth to live productive, law-abiding lives. And now for today's agenda. Again, as Will mentioned, today we will be discussing the 2021 Multistate Mentoring Program Initiative Solicitation. We will go through a program overview, the goals, objectives, and deliverables, program eligibility, priority considerations, and the application process. Again, the purpose today is to provide an overview of the solicitation, highlight any key eligibility and solicitation requirements, identify tools and resources that will help facilitate the application process, and provide an opportunity for applicants to ask questions. I first wanted to start off by talking about the solicitation. For 2021, applying for funding now requires a new 2-step process. So as you can see, there is a grants.gov deadline and an application deadline. Step 1 requires you to submit the application using the grants.gov deadline. Through grants.gov, you will submit an SF-424 cover sheet, and you will also submit an SFLLL, which is the disclosure of lobbying activities. Both of these forms need to be submitted by March 23rd by 11:59 p.m. Step 2 of the process is the complete application, which will now be submitted in Just Grants by 11:59 on April 6th. For some of you that are wondering, if you looked at the solicitation already, these dates have been extended, and the solicitation is in the process of being updated if it hasn't already. So again, the grants.gov deadline, step 1, is March 23rd, and the application deadline now is April 6th. And now to an overview on mentoring. Mentoring promotes positive behaviors, attitudes, and outcomes for youth and reduces risk factors. Mentoring has been shown to improve academic performance and or social or job skills, support behavioral or other personal development, and reduce the consumption of alcohol and other drugs. Successful programs include matches between a mentor and one or more youth. Mentoring can take place in multiple contexts and settings, such as a school. The goals of the mentoring program include promoting the implementation and delivery of mentoring services to youth that are at risk for juvenile delinquency and justice system involvement, and enhancing and expanding mentoring services for children and youth. And now we're going to get into the applicant eligibility. As part of the solicitation, there are two categories. Category 1 is mentoring organizations for 45 states, and Category 2 is mentoring organizations for 1 to 4 states. Under Category 1, the organizations should have operated an established mentoring program for at least 3 years and have active chapters or subawards in at least 5 states, but fewer than 45 states. For Category 2, the organization should have operated an established program for at least 3 years and have active chapters or subawards in 4 or fewer states. In addition, for Category 2, applicants are required to submit an attachment labeled Mentoring Organizational History. This will provide details on how long the agency has been in operation and providing services. All recipients and subrecipients must forego any profit or management fee. Eligible applicants must provide mentoring services to youth who are 17 years or younger at the time of admission to the program. For the purpose of this solicitation, 2 or more independent organizations that form a collaborative to meet the multi-state requirement in either category are not eligible to apply. Applicants may only apply for one category, and if the applicant applies for both categories, then both applications will be denied. And now on to the federal award information. OJJDP expects to make up to 10 awards in Category 1 and up to 12 awards in Category 2. And you can see the estimated dollar amount per the categories, up to $4 million in Category 1 and up to $500,000 in Category 2. The total anticipated award under this solicitation will be $26 million with a performance start date of October 1st, 2021. The period of performance is 36 months. However, projects can range from 18 to 36 months. The program's goal is to improve outcomes for at-risk and high-risk youth and reduce negative outcomes through mentoring. The program objectives should focus on the following criteria: increasing the number of youth receiving mentoring services, increasing or maintaining the number of well-trained mentors, and developing or implementing program design enhancements that align with research and evidence on effective mentoring approaches. And now we're going to discuss the deliverables. The first deliverable is to provide high-quality mentoring services that meet the needs of the identified target population while reducing delinquency and other program behaviors for at-risk youth. In identifying the target population, the applicant should explain how the approach will respond to the unique needs of the population that you've identified, promoting a positive outcome. The second deliverable is to identify and implement a program design using one or more of the 6 core practices listed in the elements of effective practice. This information is highlighted on OJJDP's website with the National Mentoring Resource Center. And as you can see, the 6 areas include recruitment, screening, training, matching and initiation, monitoring and support, and closure. An additional deliverable is addressing family engagement as a part of the program design. We've attached an available resource that you can use to see what's working in the mentoring field. Please note that applicants should clearly identify the source of the research that is being used as part of the enhancement. And for Category 1 applicants, again, that are 5 to 44 states, we want you to be able to explain how you can have the broadest reach with your proposed services. So in making the determination of broadest reach, OJJDP will consider the following factors: the number of states where the applicant can show a history of providing mentoring services through subawards, the number of states where the applicant organization proposes to use the awarded grant funds to provide services, the number of youth served, the number of mentors recruited, and the diversity and the youth being served. And now we're going to discuss an overview of the grant application process. What an application should include. On the next two slides, these are components that are listed in the application, and we will speak through each of these in more depth. The basic minimum requirements. These are the elements that are required to move forward through to the peer review process. So as part of that, you will need to submit a proposal abstract, a proposal narrative, a budget worksheet and budget narrative that's on a web-based form, and an executive summary. Here's an example of the executive summary chart. This information can be utilized in your application when you're submitting to highlight the information that's required in the table. So this just sort of gives you an example, an illustration of the executive summary information. The SF-424. This is a required standard form used as a cover sheet for submission of pre-applications and related information. The standard applicant information section in Just Grants is pre-populated with this SF-424 data. We want to make sure that you review the information and make any necessary edits. Again, this is one of the forms that will be submitted in grants.gov. The project abstract. This is a summary of the program in 400 words or less. Please keep in mind it should be written for a general public audience. As part of this, you will want to describe your purpose of the program, the population to be served, the activities that the applicant will implement to achieve the program goals, including how the applicant will measure the progress toward the goals. This part of the abstract is completed in the web-based form in Just Grants. The program narrative is the heart of the application. There's a 30-page limit that must include a description of the issue, the project design and implementation, the goals, objectives, and performance measures, capabilities and competencies, and the plan for collecting the data required for the measures. This information will be submitted as an attachment in Just Grants. The attached document should be double-spaced using a standard 12-point font, Times New Roman, with 1-inch margins. Please keep in mind if the narrative fails to comply with the length restrictions, OJJDP may negatively consider noncompliance in the peer review and final award decision. As part of the narrative, we're expecting for you to provide a description of the issue. You should briefly describe the nature and scope of the problem that you're planning to address. This should be described using data to provide evidence that the problem exists and that you can document the effects of the problem on the target population or the community. You should also make sure that you describe any other previous attempts to address this problem. For the design and implementation, you're going to detail how the project will operate throughout the funding period and describe the strategies that you're using to achieve the OJJDP program goals, objectives, and deliverables. We encourage you to select evidence-based practices for your program. Please detail any resources, either cash or in-kind, from local sources that you have to support the project. No match is required on that grant, although sometimes leverage resources are shown to provide the support. So if you're willing to go to provide that additional insight, please include that as part of your narrative. Also, you will discuss a timeline that includes the major tasks associated with the goal and the objectives of the project. And now we're going to break down the project design and implementation between the two categories. Category 1, again, the broadest reach. Applicants should explain how the project will reach a diverse population of youth. Again, as we've discussed, we will consider the number of states where the applicant can show a history of providing the services through subawards, number of proposals used to award funds providing the services, and the number of youth served, number of mentors recruited, and the diversity and the youth being served. For the target population, we will want you to define the population that you're intending to serve as part of your program. For this, you should include the juvenile youth who are at risk for delinquency, victimization, or involved in the juvenile justice system. We encourage you to consider how best to serve youth affected by drug addiction, children of parents on active military duty, children of incarcerated parents, and youth in rural communities. As part of your narrative, we would also like you to address bullying. So we will want you to highlight your proposed model that specifically address bullying in your program, and also this would include cyberbullying as well. An additional requirement is a program profile where you're required to complete this profile that will provide detailed information on your operational structure. For Category 2, Category 2 has the same requirements as 1 and 1 additional. So again, we will want you to define the target population. So again, we are encouraging you to consider how best to serve youth affected by drug addiction, children of parents on active military duty, children of incarcerated parents, and youth in rural communities. The bullying, same component as we just discussed. You should highlight how the proposed mentoring model will specifically impact bullying services, including cyberbullying. Again, a program profile is needed where applicants will give a profile of the organization and showing the organizational structure. And then the additional requirement for Category 2 is a demonstrated partnership. OJJDP encourages applicants to target mentoring services for youth that incorporate engagement with law enforcement. This engagement can be shown through an MOU. Applicants representing this partnership will receive priority consideration. Capabilities and competencies. We would like for you to describe the experience of the applicant organization, including how you will implement and manage this project. Of course, we will want you to demonstrate the ability to implement your enhancements of the program or the program in general, highlight any previous experience you have in implementing the programs of a similar design or magnitude, and then also we would like you to indicate how you meet the qualification for the category that you are applying under. Again, if you're providing mentoring services informed by research, we would like for you to provide information that you've done this on a similar scope and scale. We'd like you to describe the roles and responsibilities of program staff and the structure and operations of the organization, including providing an organizational chart that will sort of show how the organization operates. With respect for collecting the performance data required and performance measures, applicants are not required to submit performance data with the application. We do, however, want you to detail how you would gather the data should you receive funding. A link has been provided that provides an overview of OJP's performance management measurement section. And we do want to let you know that should you be selected for funding, you will be required to submit semi-annual performance reports, and further guidance on the post-award submission process will be provided if selected for an award. The budget and associated documentation. This includes the budget detail worksheet and the budget narrative. When you're completing your narrative, you should thoroughly describe every aspect of the expense that are listed in the budget detail worksheet. Again, this will be used and completed using a web-based form that will be a part of the Just Grant submission. With this, we do expect that all successful applicants will be required to participate in a cross-grantee meeting each year of the project. And we would like for you to know that up front so that you can budget the expenses accordingly. And you're entitled to include the funding for 3 representatives to travel to attend those meetings. Again, a link has been provided for the grant application resource guide that has detailed information regarding the budget process. And now I'm going to briefly cover additional information that's required as part of the application. The disclosure of lobbying form. Everyone must submit the disclosure of lobbying activities, even if you're not expending any funds for lobbying in your application. The solicitation contains a link to the form that you will upload as an attachment in JustGrants. The indirect cost rate agreement. If you include indirect costs as part of your budget, you will have a current federally approved indirect cost rate, and this must be attached as part of your application in JustGrants. Timeline we discussed as part of the narrative, and letters of support and position description can be included as part of your application. We've discussed the mentoring profile and the organizational history that's required for Category 2 applicants. The tribal authorizing resolution. So if you're a tribal organization or third party that proposes to provide direct services on tribal lands, you must include a resolution letter that demonstrates the authorization from the tribe to implement the proposed project. The financial management questionnaire is required for all applicants. Applicants will download the questionnaire and upload the form as an attachment in JustGrants. The disclosure of duplication and cost items, the pending application. This form allows OJJDP to look across federal agencies to ensure there is no duplication of efforts supporting the same project being proposed. Again, this is a web-based form in JustGrants. And finally, the applicant, a couple more, I'm sorry about that. The applicant disclosure and justification, the DOJ high-risk grantee. If you're designated as a DOJ high-risk grantee, it is important to disclose this information as part of your application. The research and evaluation independence and integrity. Should you propose research as part of your project, you must show and provide the necessary safeguards on the integrity prior to the award. Again, an attachment is required in JustGrants. And then finally, the disclosure of process related to executive compensation. Each nonprofit organization must complete the questionnaire regarding the reasonableness of compensation. And for additional details, please refer to the OJJDP Grant Application Resource Guide. The OJJDP Priority Area, we're going to cover those, and there are 4. The first area is applications that address specific challenges that rural communities face. For this priority area, you must describe what makes the area rural, how isolated the area is, and address the specific challenges in the community. The second priority area is applications that demonstrate that the individuals who are intended to benefit from the requested grant reside in high poverty areas or persistent poverty counties. Again, for priority area 2, you must demonstrate that intended recipients reside in the high poverty area or county. For priority area 3, this is applications that offer enhancements to public safety and economically distressed communities. Again, to receive priority in this area, you must specify how public safety will be enhanced. And finally, the last priority area is applications that demonstrate a partnership with a law enforcement agency via an MOU. Again, for this priority area, you have to demonstrate that the law enforcement partnership and your program model, and of course, this information has to be included in an existing MOU. This is the selection process and how the applications are evaluated by peer reviewers. So again, for this process, the applications have to meet the basic minimum requirements, and then it would move on to peer review using the following criteria defined on the slide. For the application review process, OJP is committed to ensuring a fair and open process for awarding grants. OJJDP reviews the application to make sure that the information presented is reasonable, understandable, measurable, achievable, and it's consistent with the information required as part of the solicitation. Through this process, peer reviewers will review the applications submitted under the solicitation to ensure that they meet those basic minimum requirements that we discussed. We may use internal peer reviewers or external peer reviewers or a combination of the two to review all applications. Other considerations that we take into account include geographic diversity, strategic priorities, and available funding. Where and how to apply. Again, this year there is a two-step process that you need to utilize when submitting the application. The first is grants.gov, and that deadline is March 23rd, 2021. And then the second step, again, is the Just Grants application deadline, which is April 6th, 2021. Applicants will submit the SF424 and SFLLL through grants.gov, and the full application, including your attachments, will be submitted through Just Grants. Please make sure that you register with grants.gov as soon as possible, as we know that the grant registration process can take some time. We also urge you to submit your application 72 hours prior to the application due date. The reason being, we know that sometimes there are validation messages or rejection notices that come through, and we want to ensure that if you receive one of those messages, you will be able to rectify everything in a timely manner. We want to make sure that you understand that every organization will need to have a DUNS number, and if you don't have one, you will need to contact Duns & Bradstreet at the phone number listed and at the link provided below. So you will need a DUNS number, and then you also are required to register with SAM.gov. So the contact information for both of the organizations is listed on the slide. Again, we encourage you to sign up for grants.gov email notifications. If there's any modifications to the notification, then you will receive those updates. As I stated earlier, right now the application had dates, and we've updated those. So again, if you register that, if there are any more updates for the solicitation, you will automatically receive those. And just to note, late applications are not accepted unless there's a problem with grants.gov, SAM.gov, or Just Grants on OJJDP's end. So if there's a problem on your side, for instance, say you don't have a DUNS number, this will not result in a waiver to submit a late application. Right here you will see information for grants.gov if you need technical assistance as you're going through the application process. So here's their contact information. The same information is provided for Just Grants. I did want to take some time to talk about a new series of sessions that will be forthcoming in the next few weeks. These new application sessions will provide applicants with information on how to submit an application for funding to DOJ. Specifically, these sessions will show you how to navigate and use Just Grants. Things that will be included will discuss how to access and utilize the new system to apply for funding, how to search and find open DOJ funding opportunities, the steps that you need to take before you apply for funding, such as SAM.gov. It will explain the difference and the roles for certain things using the Just Grant system and the steps that you need to take in order to assure that you can submit an application. And it will also explain how to navigate, use the system, and find resources, including training materials and job aids. This slide provides additional information on resources that may be helpful to you as you're submitting your application. And I think with that, we will open it up for the Q&A.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much, Rakia. We did get a good amount of questions to come in from the audience. So before we go into the Q&A, just a few things. One, for the audience members who in the chat indicated they needed access or had any trouble downloading the PDF, I'm going to go ahead and do another file transfer, or excuse me, a share of the PDF. So I'm doing that now for folks. If you had any issues or trouble accessing the PDF that was provided in the beginning, I am doing a file share of that. In addition to that, I'm going to ask my co-host to go ahead and share that Google link drive as well. That's another way that you can access the PDF of today's presentation. If neither the file transfer that I just shared or neither the Google link that we just provide, the Google Drive link we provide, does not work, then please contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk at OJJDP TTA USDOJ.gov, and we can email you the PDF of that. Those documents. Also, just to note for everyone, please note that we do have the response center information up on this slide. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can, but just note that we did have quite a few come in, so if we don't make it to your question, the response center information is indeed up here where you can send it in. So thanks for letting me kind of get that out the way first, Rakia, before we get in. We did have a lot of questions I came in specifically about accessing the PDF for today's presentation. Yeah. Sure. So the first round of questions are around eligibility that came in from the audience. So it looks like one person asked, if several affiliates of a nonprofit organization come together to provide mentoring services, can one of the affiliates apply, or does the national organization need to submit the application?
So I think that for this question, you will just want to make sure that you're not circumventing the information that we provided earlier with respect to the number of organizations. So you wouldn't want to be coming in forming multiple, coming together as multiple organizations in order to meet that eligibility criteria. So as long as you're not doing that and the organizations come together, you should be able to submit the application. One of the things that we have stated before is 2 or more independent organizations that form a collaborative to meet the multi-state requirement in either category are not eligible to apply.
Okay. Someone asked if their program is only implemented in one state, can they apply?
Yes, so you would refer to the criteria. So that would be considered category 2, which is 1 to 4 states. So with that, you would need to make sure that the organizations have operated an established mentoring program for at least 3 years, and then you have the active chapters of subawardees in 1 to 4 states as well.
Okay. Does it make a difference if you fit into multiple priority application categories?
No, so there are 4 that are selected, so you would just need to make sure if you're saying that your application meets all of those, you would want to state which ones that you feel that your application, the priority you have, and you would list those accordingly. Okay.
This next question I'm going to summarize a little bit because it was a bit long here. Okay. But there was an organization that mentioned that they provide mentoring services and operated out of a nonprofit for many years, and now they recently secured 501c3 status. And so they want to know if they're eligible, given that we have provided services for many years but are newer as a nonprofit, or that 501c3 status.
So again, for this, you would want to make sure that you can meet the eligibility criteria. So with that, the criteria, depending on the number, which category you fall in, you would make sure that you've operated the program for at least 3 years and you have the active chapters and subawards. And so if you have that and you meet the criteria, whether it's category 1 or category 2, then you should be eligible to submit your application.
Okay. And yes, it looks like several folks did ask or just wanted to confirm that if they are nonprofits, if they were eligible to apply.
Yeah, so in essence, we're looking for mentoring organizations, the criteria that have operated the program with the respective number of years and have that chapters or sub-awardees.
Okay. And if a organization services several school sites, would they be eligible to apply?
Again, I know that it seems like I'm repeating the information, but I would ask that you look at the applicant eligibility to see how you fit between categories 1 and category 2, and if you meet the definitions as defined as far as that eligibility, then you should be good. And any additional questions that you may have concerning specifics, I would recommend that you send those to the Response Center.
Okay. In the same lines here with eligibility, is it required to meet one of the 4 priority areas?
It's not a requirement. We're listing how, we encourage people to meet the priority areas. And so that's up to you should you choose to meet one of those, but there's not a requirement that it has to fit in one of the priority areas.
Okay, great. And again, just wanted to remind the audience, we have the Response Center information here, and we're trying to get to as many questions as we can. Some are super detailed and nuanced, but I just do want to let the audience know that we have the Response Center information up here in case we are not able to get to your particular question, because we do have a lot that came in here. So the next one that the question that we received is in regard to some clarification around the category type, or even maybe clarification around definitions. Should Category 1 applicants describe how they serve rural, high poverty areas, or areas that are QOZs too?
So yes, for any proposal that or application that's submitted, as part of your target population, you should define whatever the category or target population you intend to serve. And then should that meet one of the priority areas, you would speak to the specifics on how the criteria that OJJDP would look and marking that as a priority area. But any population that's identified, you should thoroughly describe how you'll be meeting the needs of that organism, that population.
Okay. Let's see, is the mentoring program profile attachment requested for both Category 1 and Category 2 applicants, or just Category 2 applicants?
So the profile is needed for both Categories 1 and 2. The difference is for Category 2, they also have an organizational history that they will have to submit, but the profile is required for both Categories 1 and 2.
Okay, great. Let's see, is the funding range per year or for the entire 36 months?
If you could submit that to the Response Center, I just want to verify a couple of things, and then if you could submit that to the Response Portal, I'll get back. The amount of funding is the $26 million is for this solicitation, which would be for the whole time frame. But if you have specific additional questions with that, I would encourage you to submit a more detailed response to the Response Center, or a detailed question.
Okay, thank you. Again, still along the lines here of questions around clarification of category types. For Category 2, can an established mentoring program apply if its mentoring program operates in one state and does not have additional chapters?
According to the criteria, the program has to have at least 3 years of service and have active chapters of sub-awardees in 4 or fewer states. So again, if you meet that criteria, as long as you meet that criteria, you should be able to identify and submit that proposal.
Okay. This question we saw come in multiple times. And again, it came in from several people. And so I'm just asking the more larger question here, Rakia, that basically all of them asked. And it is, how are you defining active chapters?
Sure. So this is something that we're working on the definition for. I think that there have been definitions provided in years past. And so this information, if you could send it to the response center, we will be sending something out regarding this, or we'll provide that information to the response center in order to update everyone. I just want to ensure that the information we provide matches information that's been utilized at the past. So we are working through that process right now on the, with the definition for chapters and subawardees.
Okay. And is there a minimum number of mentees that are required for Category 2?
No, there is no requirement on the number of mentees.
Okay. Do the 4 priority areas apply to both Category 1 and Category 2 applicants?
If you could send that to the response center, I want to double check on that internally. And I want to refer back to the information and to the solicitation. So if you could send that in, I'll verify that prior to answering.
Okay, these next set of questions are around the MOU. They wanted to know if they could get clarification on the law enforcement certification, which is compliance with Executive Order 139929. Does the certificate need to be included in the MOU or referenced in the MOU, which would work best?
So there is detailed information on this new certification requirement. I can send that. There's a link that speaks to the standards on what needs to be a part of that. So I don't know, Will, I can provide that link to you so that we could post that, but there is specific information that needs to be required regarding the executive order.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and we can, while we're going through some Q&A, maybe see if we can post that as well. Or if you want, Rakia, we can also just, if you have that link, want to post it inside of the chat to everyone, we can also do that as well.
Okay, I'm trying to post it now, but it doesn't look like I have the ability. So I can get with you on that and post the link specifically for that. And I do know that it is included as part of the solicitation as well.
Okay, thank you.
The link actually takes you to the COPS office. So it's https with the / cops.usdoj.gov/safe-policing-EO, but I can, again, try to post or send the link. I'll keep trying to see if I have the ability to send the link.
And if you email it to myself and Alyssa, we can try to get that posted if you want to just email that to us. And I'll see if Alyssa can post that link in there. Great.
Okay.
And while you're emailing that link, let's see, it looks like the next set of questions here were some questions around the page limit in the attachment. And so the first question we have here, can tables and footnotes be less than 12-point font and single-spaced?
So the narrative page limit is 30 pages for the narrative information. And so the narrative, when we're talking about the narrative, we're thinking about just straight information that you would, of course, double space. For attachments and things such as that, you can add an attachment and include that as an additional attachment to your application.
Okay, great. And just a heads up for everyone on, my co-host did indeed include that link that we were referring to earlier. So you all should see that in the chat here that we've posted that link that Rakia was referring to. All right. The next question, again, just about the page limit. does the timeline count towards the page limit?
So the timeline is listed as part of the narrative information. And so, yes, it would count as part of the 30 pages.
Okay. Is the organizational chart requested as an attachment or included in the program narrative?
So for the attachment for the organizational profile, that is something that is the additional, it's part of the addendum and that information. So that would be separate from the narrative documents.
Okay. Let's see. The next question here. Again, this is around these page limit and attachments. Can citations be included as an attachment, or must they be included in the program narrative? And this is referring to citations.
I think it can be either or. I think it's just dependent on, you want to make sure that your narrative is within the 30 pages. If you want to, if your narrative is such where you're completely, where you wouldn't be utilizing the whole 30 pages and you would want to include it as part of the narrative, you could do that. If your narrative is more substantial and then you want to include an additional attachment that lists some of where you have those other resources, you could do that.
Okay. The next question here, it says, is about the budget narrative. Is the budget narrative part of the web-based budget form, or is that a document that we can create in Word and attach?
No, the budget is a form, and so that will be completed in JustGrants. So it is a specific form that you will insert your information into.
Okay. Will a provisional indirect cost rate be accepted?
So for the application, you can submit a provisional rate. However, should you be selected for funding prior to receiving your award, you would have to you would be asked for the documentation to show that you have a current indirect cost rate. So I think a provisional one would be fine, but you will want to make sure once it goes through and you have a full indirect cost rate that's been approved, that you have that, because you will be asked for that additional documentation.
Okay. The next set of questions here are getting into, I believe, the technical or maybe even JustGrants. And I can actually, Rukia, put up that JustGrants slide here just for folks who may have missed this particular portion. So the first question is, should the SF424 and LLL be submitted on JustGrants as well as justgrants.gov?
So the first two forms, the SF424 and the lobbying form, will be submitted through grants.gov and would not be necessary to submit as part of the application through JustGrants. So that's what we were talking about through that two-step process. So those two forms will go through grants.gov, and then the remaining part of the application will go through JustGrants. And again, for additional grants questions, I know that we can sort of speak to those a little bit, but I think that it may be helpful for the new sessions they're having. That information will be forthcoming soon as far as JustGrants information on how to navigate the system and use that. They will be having specific trainings associated with that to walk through all those specific and all that information.
Next questions or set of questions we have here, it looks like some individuals are asking with release, will funds be actually available to be spent fully released on October 1st?
So that process, when the application is submitted and after it comes in order to proceed with a grant, you do have to receive a final clearance on the budget. And so depending on where it is in the process, you will have to receive that. Oftentimes that happens and projects will be able to receive that clearance and go forward. Oftentimes it takes a little bit longer. So I think that's sort of a case-by-case basis. The grant award would start with the projected date of October 1st. But again, in order for you to move forward and start the spending of your grant, you do have to receive that clearance on the budget and make sure everything is vetted. And then once you receive that, you would be able to start. And so there are various things that happen with respect to that could cause, some time delays on that. But that's the process that we go through. And so once you receive that final budget clearance, then you'll be able to move forward with the operations of your proposed project and award.
Okay. Next question here. Can we compensate volunteer mentors in any capacity? And they give examples like a stipend or gift card, things of that nature.
Sure. I would ask that you submit that question to the response center, and we will get back with you, and we'll make sure that we're in alignment with our finance office on that as well, the Office of the Chief Finance Comptroller's Office, so OCFO. We will we'll be able to get back with you on that.
Okay. Let's see, this question coming in, is the executive summary just a chart, or is there more information that we need to include outside of the chart in that section?
Yeah, so it is just the information that's included in the chart. I think that it was listed in the PowerPoint as just that bullet, but the chart has been provided sort of as a synopsis of the detailed information that you would need to include. So whether or not you list that out or utilize that chart, as long as you're providing the information that's in that chart, that would suffice.
Okay. Let's see. This question, it looks like someone asked, and this is in relation to the performance measures. With the release of new performance measures compared to previous solicitations, what are the recommended data collection sources for the new measures?
So again, with the performance measures, right now it would be semi-annually as previously stated through the Just Grant system, and any additional requirements or details about that would be forthcoming once you receive the funding.
Okay. Let's see. Someone asked here, who do letters of support get sent to? Question mark.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question. So can you repeat that, Will?
Yeah, well, it just only said who do letters of support get sent to, but if that person needs to submit to the response center or provide more clarity, I could come back to it later.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's see the next question coming in. Should we also submit 2 items that have been helpful or requested in the past? And they give an example of a letter confirming that they're using the new minimus rate for indirect cost and why, or maybe even a logic model. So those are just some examples that they're asking us if they're wondering if they should submit those too.
So for the indirect cost rate, if it's something that is your current rate that you already have approved, that would be a requirement that you needed to upload that. And if you have a logic model that you want to submit, you could submit that as well. Going back to, with respect to the indirect cost rate, Will, can you repeat the question? Because there was another part of that that I want to make sure that I capture.
Yeah, sure. And I'll just read it a little bit more verbatim here. I'm wondering if we should also submit 2 items that have been helpful or requested in the past. A letter confirming we are using the de minimis rate for indirect cost and why. And then they also say our logic model, question mark.
Yeah, so for the indirect cost rate, if it's what you have currently and it speaks to the currently approved rate, yes, that should be included. If it's different than what you had in the past, we wouldn't be asking for you to provide something to substantiate, say you received money in the past and it has changed. We would be asking for the current information, which should match the detailed information that you have as part of your budget.
Let's see, are there any budget items off limits with funding?
I think that question may need to be submitted to the response Center, I'm not sure specifically what you're asking with that question. So I would recommend submitting that to the Response Center and we can get an answer back to you.
Okay, let's see. This next question is it's not quite completely developed. It looks like they kind of parsed it out. So let me just go back in and see if there are other questions that have come in. And while I'm looking through here, Ricky, if there's any parts that you want to continue to add or even other things to let the audience know, you can do so, and I'll just go back in just to confirm a few of these questions here. And also to the audience, just to let you know, please make sure you're submitting your questions to all panelists. We are indeed receiving your questions. Just make sure you're submitting them to all panelists. It looks like a couple of questions unfortunately got cut off or are incomplete here. So I'm just going to move on to maybe the next one. Could a program period of performance begin January 1st, 2022, and then have a 36-month POP to end December 31st, 2025, or similar dates later than October 1st, 2021? So,
what would happen is the award start date would be October 1st, 2021, and go forward for 36 months should the project be proposed for a 36-month time frame. And so those would be the program dates. Anything extended on would be a conversation should you receive funding, depending on the mechanics of your grant, working directly with your program manager to see sort of where you would meet that. But the standard would be that the project would be a start October 1.
And again, just to remind the audience, on the slide that's up here, we do have the Response Center information. And so if we don't get a chance to get to any of your questions, you can contact the Response Center through the information here. Let's see. Okay, this is more of a miscellaneous question that's come in here. Rakia, they wanted to know what's been the percentage of grants awarded to programs operating in small rural communities. I'm not sure if that's a statistic that you have off the top of your head, but if you want to speak to any of, I guess, the rural communities that receive the grant, or we can have that person to submit their question to Response
Sure.
Center.
I would ask that you submit that question to the Response Center. Regarding statistics, I would have to get back with you concerning exactly what that's looked like in previous years.
Great. And it looks like, just verifying, but a lot of the other questions that came in, you've definitely spoke on already, and so I don't want us to sound like a broken record here. So I believe that that's all the questions that we've had in so far for the Q&A. Again, a lot of these questions that did come in, you mentioned or even repeated many, many times during today's webinar. So any last-minute items for the audience, Rakia, before we close out? It looks like the questions have slowed down.
No, I don't believe so. I thank you all for joining today. And if there was a question that we didn't get to or that you need further clarification on, again, please send those responses to the Response Center and you will receive a response back from us. But thank you so much for attending.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kia. And before we close out as well, just want to go through a few last-minute slides with the audience here. So one of which we definitely want to provide you all, again, the information here. Just keep in mind on the slide that you see that's shared, you all should have received, or you all should see the PDF of today's presentation. I'm going to go ahead and share that again with the audience just in case, but if you're having trouble accessing this PDF for today's presentation, please be sure to reach out to OJJDP TTA at USDOJ.gov and we can get you access to the PDF for today's webinar. If you'd like to get in contact with Intacc, you may do so through the information that's on this slide. You can also check us out on OJJDP's TTA on Facebook, and you can also sign up for our listserv where you can learn more about additional webinars that we have coming up. If you'd like to get in contact with, again, the help desk, if you'd like to learn more about the JuveJust or even upcoming events, we have that information here on this slide where you can, again, learn more or get more contact information about the help desk to receive, say, this PDF. If you were unable to access the PDF, there's the help desk information there. The OJJDP website is here on this slide as well, where you can go in and actually find out more about OJJDP and access resources through OJJDP's website. Again, sign up for the listserv to learn more about events coming up and through the OJJDP website to know about upcoming events. Do you have a training or technical assistance need? Well, if so, you could submit the request for help via the OJJDP TTA 360 platform. Through that platform, as you can see on this slide, you can easily access OJJDP TTA 360 to submit your TTA request. Please note, as I mentioned before earlier in today's presentation, that we do have the OJJDP multimedia page up and available for you to view more webinars on juvenile justice and child victimization prevention related topics. If you'd like to get any supporting materials related to those webinars on the website, you can contact the OJJDP TTA Help Desk. This is the various ways you can get in contact or stay connected with OJJDP. And please note, we do have a couple of events coming up for the month of February, including a webinar coming up tomorrow with our colleagues at the NDAA, the National District Attorneys Association. We also have another solicitation webinar coming up February 4th as well. And then we have two additional webinars in a two-part series with NDAA that are coming up at the end of, or next week as well, that you can sign up for and that are available to register for. We also have a webinar with our colleagues with Street Law coming up on the 10th and another solicitation webinar on the 11th of February. And then one final thing for everyone, I'm going to share another poll question for folks to fill out. And the poll question is on how do you plan to apply your knowledge. Please note that this particular poll question is multiple answers, so you can go in and you can actually select multiple options here. So again, we want to know, how do you plan to apply the information from this webinar? And you can select multiple options here. So that being said, I want to say thank you to everyone. Have a great afternoon and take care. Thank you.